Welcome to the Honest Designers Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom Ross and I'm the founder at designcuts.com, and this week I'm joined by my fellow Brit and hand lettering expert Ian Barnard and American retro design expert Dustin Lee. This week we're talking with Henry Kaminski, otherwise known as the Brand Doctor. Henry has run a 7-figure agency and now serves pro athletes with his strategic design services. Henry is very much someone who has been there and done it. So really excited to welcome you to the show, Henry. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Tom, thank you for having me, brother. I'm really excited to be here and really excited to, give as much value as I can in 60 minutes.
Yeah, as you said at the start, and we're on a similar constraint, we got 60 minutes. I know you've got a hell of a story. So before we jump in and start picking your brain, do you want to kick off by sharing that with the listeners, please?
I'll go super fast because I have a tendency to drag. So 13 years ago, I was a freelance designer, just like everybody else that's probably watching and listening to this. I was a one-man band. I was designing for nightclubs and cover bands, doing club flyers and print material, nothing crazy. But I was really fast. I sucked. I was a horrible designer, but I was really fast on getting it turned around. And so my clients saw that and they took advantage and they were like, well, you might not be the best designer, but you're the fastest and we want to make money. So we're going to go with the fastest and we'll groom you into what we want. And so I was like, okay, fine. So I did that for 5 years and it was pretty amazing because it grew steadily every year. And then eventually it really started to catch up to me. One, I didn't want to scale because I didn't know how. I was afraid to scale because I had in my head that nobody's going to be able to design faster than me. Nobody's going to be going to do it as fast as me. So I'm just going to grind this out until I can't anymore and see what happens. And I'll never forget it. I forget what I was watching or who I was talking to, but I do remember this. This was it. So at the time I lived in a 2-bedroom walk-up and I was working 20 hours a day and it was horrendous. Like the only time I got to see my girlfriend, my wife now, was literally when we slept. And I remember it was a Saturday afternoon. It was like 4 p.m. I've been working since 4 a.m. And I stopped to get something to drink. And I said, am I going to be 50 years old designing club flyers? I don't want this. And that's when the entire business took a huge turn because I started to get really resentful of my work. And I like hated it. I hated it. Right. And eventually I started to just lose one client at a time because I was so hot-headed. Like if I got a revision sent to me, I would like lose my mind. I would like Motley Crue my office because it was such a ridiculous change. Right. And you're probably laughing, but it was horrible. It was horrible. And eventually I was down to like just a couple of clients with barely any money in the bank because I made a lot of money, but I spent every dollar I made on dumb shit. I'm sorry. I don't know if I could curse here.
Oh, yeah, you definitely can. It's fine.
Okay.
I was saying to the guys before you jumped on, you were like a bit of a party guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, a majority of my clients were the nightlife clubs. So, there was a lot of fringe benefits that came with that. So I would go out and party every weekend, it would start on Wednesdays and it would end on Sunday. And I rinsed and repeated that for 5 years. Right. And it was a lot of fun. I was in my early 20s. I thought I was hot shit, like you get to skip the line, you get to meet the DJs, you get to meet the celebrity guests that come, like you get to do all of that. But it came with a cost. And one, I fell into some really bad habits. We could get into that in another episode, but I got into some really horrible habits. Again, spent very frivolously all of my money on cars and watches and vacations and girls and, just name it. And at the end of the year, I didn't even have an accountant the first couple years, but like once I finally got an accountant, they were like, "Where's all this money going?" And I was like, I spend it like it's burning in my hand. And nobody really gave me the financial intelligence or financial understanding of what to do with any of my money. So I'll never forget it. We moved out of that 2-bedroom walk up. We got a townhome, which was probably twice the size. And again, everybody thought I was crushing it. I kept it a secret that I really didn't have any money. I just had some cash in a safe. And I'll never forget, I was at my father-in-law's house for a 4th of July party, and everybody was having a great time. And I was miserable sitting in the corner, just like drinking my face off because I was like trying to just disguise this failure. And I'll never forget, I come home and my mom, that was a Freudian slip. My wife was actually,
it's when you mean one thing, but say your mother. Wait.
I did that too to my psychologist. He was like, "I'm going to let that go this time."
Yeah.
I did that too.
So my wife loves that Real Housewives of whatever show, right? So she's watching the show. I'm sitting on the bed, and the husband gets one of his wife to come to lunch with him to let her know that he is going bankrupt. And I was like, I don't know if this is a sign from God or what have you, but this is the time that I need to speak up. So I shut the TV off and I said to my wife, "Listen, we got to talk." And she's like, "What's going on?" And I said, "I am absolutely broke." And now, meanwhile,
she didn't know at this point.
No clue. Meanwhile, Range Rover in the driveway. We just got back from a huge cruise, a 7-day cruise, and she just kind of like looks at me with this blank stare, and I'm like, she's like, "Well, where's it all going?" And I was like, "Well, trips and cars and this and that." And I thought I was just going to get backhanded and, the divorce papers were going to be served the next day. But so what happens was she jumps off the bed, all 100 pounds, 5 foot of her, flies into my office, grabs my laptop, comes into the bed, looks at me and says, "Well, let's get to work then."
Love that.
And I was like, "Well, on what? Divorce attorneys or like getting my business back in shape?" And she's like, "Well, getting your business back in shape, dummy." So she starts to help me do some competitive. Now, I knew nothing about design or marketing or branding at the time. I was just like a churn and burn designer. Like you give me something to design and I could design it faster than you. I can promise you that. Right. So I just didn't know much about anything else but that. Right. So we start doing research and I realized that there's a few deficiencies that I have. One is just business acumen overall, like how to actually run a business profitably. I did not know how to market myself properly because a lot of my work came word of mouth. So I was just used to that. And that's a trap. When you start to get a lot of referrals, it's very easy to get comfortable in that and like not ever want to market yourself or put yourself out there again. Huge trap.
Yeah, just to jump in for a second there, I think that's a real interesting point because even I've said on this show, referrals are great, and they bring you some very warm potential clients. You can often charge more when someone comes to you via referral. But the way I think about pricing is it's supply and demand. And so obviously the more demand for your services, the higher a price you can command. And you are not going to be maximizing the amount of demand if you're just sitting back and relying on referrals. If you combine referrals with some quite aggressive marketing and being very proactive there, the demand will increase and therefore you should be able to command a higher price.
Amen.
Anyway, sorry, keep going, man.
Yeah,
just had to say that.
That was a perfect plug. So, so I start doing some research and I realized that like I know nothing about this industry. So I get immediate imposter syndrome. Like, what have you been doing the past 5 years? Like, this is pure luck that you've been able to get this far. All right. So a lot of mindset issues, right? I had a lot of skeletons in the closet, a lot of insecurities, growing up as a kid, my mother abandoning my father and I, my father raising me as a single dad. A lot of things, a lot of skeletons in the closet, and I had to get through that. So I started to get more curious online, and I found this company called digitalmarketer.com, and they were for like digital marketers and agency owners and creatives and whoever wanted to get into digital marketing. And they had a very solid platform, like for newbies to the advanced. And so I dove in. There was this $1 trial that showed up in my Facebook ads one day. Come into our Facebook group for $1 to try it for the first month. I said, shit, I got $1. I'll give it a whirl. So I get in there.
Part of that. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I get in there and I'm completely a novice. Like, I didn't even know what an upsell was. So like I had to like Google what an upsell was because I was afraid to ask it. Right. So I start to get my chops wet with digital marketing. And then people are talking about this platform called ClickFunnels. And I'm like, what the hell is ClickFunnels? So ClickFunnels is this website page builder for non-techie people. So you don't need any coding background or development background. It's all drag and drop, and it's pretty easy to use. So the co-founder at the time was Russell Brunson, and I started to find more out about him, and I started listening to his podcast, and I started tinkering around in ClickFunnels, and I was like, holy crap, I see a huge advantage here. Like, with my design skill, with my speed, I could probably bang these things out pretty fast and charge a decent penny for them because I could see what people are throwing around as far as price points go. So I get in there and I start playing around, and I get a couple of clients, 500 here, 600 there. I didn't even know what to charge at the time because I was so new. So then I said, you know what? Why don't I just pay to play and hire Russell to coach me up on this stuff, right? So I reach out to ClickFunnels, and I find out that he has a coaching program. So I go to the coaching. I go through this whole funnel, right? And I get to the guy who's about to sell me the program, and he says, this is a $25,000 engagement. And I was like, nope, I did not. So I was like, well, do you got anything cheaper? Because I like the concept. I think this is going to help me, but like, there's no way I have 25K. So he did this whole spiel and comes back and he's like, listen, Russell has this 10K program. Why don't you come into that? And I was like, well, that's a lot of money for me too. I was like, I'll tell you what, if you accept $5,000 on a credit card and allow me to pay the extra $5 back in the next 5 months, I was like, I'll do it. And they said yes. So I'm like, all right, cool, let's do it. So I jumped on a call with Russell Brunson for 60 minutes. And I literally pour my heart out. I tell him exactly where I'm at with my business. Basically the same story I just told you. It's a little bit more detailed, right? And I said to him straight up, I said, it's not if this coaching works, it's when this coaching works is when I will be able to get out of this mess. So at the end of the conversation, we're both hysterically crying. And he looks at me and says, I have a book coming out in a month. It's called .com Secrets. Would you help me build the marketing collateral around it so that I can push it hard once it comes out? And I said, sure. He was like, well, what does it cost? And I was like, well, I don't know. I literally just threw a number out there out of my ass. I was like, how's 6,000 sound? He was like, done, right there on the spot. So I had made 60% of my freaking investment back in 1 hour by just getting into my comfort zone, getting out of my comfort zone and doing something really scary.
I love that. And so in terms of the coaching, were you paying for an hour of his time or were you paying for an ongoing thing?
I had to pay the $5K So I paid $5K on a credit card. One thing I did have was, and I still have, is a lot of credit. Like I have great credit.
Yeah.
Right. One thing my father taught me was, doesn't matter, just have great credit. So I had great credit. So I swiped $5K and then I paid the 5 off in 5 months. So I start working with Russell and I start to learn a lot about how his mind operates because we're starting to work very closely together. So I'm picking up things here and there. This is the advantage of having a high profile client like him. So I start banging out a lot of work and I start getting a little bit better with funnel building. I'm still horrible at it, but I'm getting there, right? So I land my first $3,000 client in the ClickFunnels world, and it absolutely goes to hell in a handbasket. Like I told him I could do the copywriting. I couldn't do copywriting. I told him I could do the whole design and build out. I couldn't do any of that shit. I was just trying to like stay afloat and make as much money as I possibly could to bail me out, right? I was about 5K in the hole, like negative, which is, I've heard horror stories of people being millions in debt. And that just makes my skin curl. But so I wasn't anything like that. Everybody has a different story and there's always a horror story worse than yours. I'm not saying mine.
I mean, Dustin, what were you, 30K?
Yep, 30K in credit card debt.
That to me might as well be 30 million, right? It might as well. But we'll talk about that story in a second because I get there. I get to about 40K in debt. So I start to really not make a name for myself in the ClickFunnels community. And so luckily, because I was in Russell's group, because Russell at the time was really endorsing me a lot. He was like, I met this phenomenal, and anybody who needed design back then, Russell would go out and be like, you got to use Henry. He's the best, right? And then I would fuck up the job. And finally, he said to me, Henry, this world is very small. You do this one more time, and I'm going to have to tell you to find another niche because your name will not be good here anymore. And he's like, I love you to death. I think you're an amazing individual. But as your coach, what did he say to me? He's like, as your coach, you're my responsibility. So I need to coach you up on this stuff. So he like literally rebuilt like my funnel and showed me literally hand by hand, like showed me how to do everything. And then I was able to take my design skill that he didn't have and like make everything pretty. So it started to get better, thank God. So long story short, within 18 months, I had generated $500,000 worth of revenue, which got me out of the hole. I was living high on the hog again, right? Still not financially intelligent. So what did I do? Continued my spending habits. It's like I never learned my lesson. Why? Because I didn't know what else to do. And so we're living good again. Wifey's happy. Everything's fantastic, but we're not making any money. It's just being spent. So that's so I go on for, let's say, another 3 years. Good news is Russell comes to me, when was it? I forget the exact date. Russell, after we finished the .com Secrets project, he comes back to me a couple of weeks, a few months later. Why? Because I again put my neck out and I said, you know what? I'm listening to this guy's podcast every day, and I am disgusted by his podcast cover design. It just does not represent the value that he delivers in this show. So on a Sunday morning, I redesigned the podcast cover and I sent it to him in a Facebook message. And I said, I don't care if you use this or not, but at least this cover will, in my opinion, will represent the value that you deliver on that podcast. So he's like, oh man, this is awesome. Thank you so much. Didn't do anything with it for a couple of months. Something happens 2 months later and he Facebook messaged me and he says, you have that podcast cover again? I can't find it. Or I forgot to save it. And I said, no problem. I resend it to him. He's like, all right, thanks. The next day was Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving morning, he sends me another message. Listen, we need some consistent branding done for ClickFunnels. We are looking for somebody to take that project on. Now, mind you, it was just me at the time. I didn't have my team yet. Would you be willing to take that on? And I said, let's do it. So for the next 2.5 years, I spent my time with the ClickFunnels team and company just making sure that their branding was consistent. And I was able to then get into that $25,000 coaching group after the first year. And I spent a year in that group and met a lot of fantastic people. I met some not so cool people. But I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot from people that were making a shit ton more money than I was at the time. And I knew what I wanted and I knew what I didn't want. So fast forward, things are getting back on track. And one thing that I realized that I was missing as a designer was my time. I still didn't have any time really to myself. Like we would go on trips and vacations, but I would have my laptop and I would freaking be designing off of a cruise ship, for 6 hours because I didn't have anybody else to do it. Right. And when you stop, the business stops. And that's not a good model. Anybody will tell you that.
Yeah. Trading your time for money.
Yeah. So that's where
something
I was.
Every entrepreneur tries getting away from. Yeah. Just for a second, because I'm thinking of the listeners here and I'm thinking of my younger self. I actually did some nightclub flyers and a lot of websites. I was a web designer for many years, and maybe it's the space you were in, but those figures sound like astonishingly high when I think back to like the sucky wages that I was getting doing that kind of work. So was it that specific community that was very lucrative? Was it the intros you were getting from Russell to command that kind of fees even early on?
Let me back up a step. So what happened was I would do these nightclub flyers and then I would get reimbursed by a liquor distributor or a beer company. And so what happened then was I get introduced to a liquor salesman. And that liquor salesman says, we have huge budgets for this stuff. Could you do all of my accounts? Not just nightclubs, but now every restaurant and bar in the state of New Jersey, I'm doing stuff for. And it's print. So this is when print was like really popular. So I would charge 300% markup on a print project because Grey Goose was paying for it.
Okay, that makes sense. I was doing like my local nightclub, and I remember thinking like, this is hard work. Like this sounds like you don't realize it at the time, but I've had several friends, and I guess I've been in some positions myself, and it's almost like you just struck gold at the right moment. Yeah. And it's hard to replicate. Maybe 10 years later, it might not play out, but that particular industry was frothy or whatever it might have been.
And never mind the low wages. I remember like a typical flyer design, I was getting paid $50 US. That's it. And then the competition got so bad, it got to the point where I was doing flyers for $35 US.
Yeah, see, that's like the magnitude I was thinking of. And I was like, how are you affording all this stuff? But it kind of unlocked the gateway to something bigger. Yeah.
So then what happens was Coors Light, Guinness, Grey Goose, Absolute. And the list goes on so I worked for these liquor companies, and these liquor companies would pay the bill for the club, right? Mm-hmm. Or for the restaurant. And that was how I made a massive amount of money. Now, here's what happens. About 3 years into that, Hurricane Sandy comes through New Jersey and wipes out 2 of my biggest liquor distributors. So 2 of them, I would say, would represent about $250,000 worth of revenue. Gone. Overnight. How do I make that money back? I don't. So now I start to slip back in to this mess. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so that actually happened prior to meeting Russell.
Right.
The
Okay.
timeline's getting a little
And
crazy.
so yeah, so with the websites, how do they command so much
I wasn't even
money as well?
doing websites until after I met Russell.
Yeah,
And I
yeah, that's
started,
what I mean, kind of fast
yeah,
forwarding. So I think you said like 500,000 in 18 months. And I'm sure the listeners are, again, like, damn, that sounds so much higher than what they can perhaps command at this point.
yeah. So I was charging like 25K, 30K for these because people were paying it.
Mm.
Right. So that adds up quick.
And I'm guessing that's because you were in a space where many of these people were paying 10, 25,000 for coaching. So you were in a market where people had the money. And this is such an important lesson for everyone listening. We've talked about this before, picking the right niche and the right audience and market to serve. I had clients in the past that were dead broke. And you can literally, your work can be identical. You can do the exact same work, but serve a more affluent market. And just it's different orders of magnitude with how much money you can make.
Totally. And we'll get into brandingforathletes.com in a second. And that's sort of the tie into what you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. So one thing I love about these gurus out there is that they talk about money all the time. And they almost pre-frame the entire industry to pay more for quality, pay more for this, pay more for that. And so the entire ClickFunnels community is used to paying a high ticket because it comes from the horse's mouth. I pay, I charge $5,000 an hour. So when I say $25,000 for a funnel, that looks cheap. Mm-hmm. Compared to some other people, they're paying $50,000 or $100,000 for one funnel. So I start tearing it up, right? So what happens then is I realize that I'm only one spoke in the wheel, and I go to Russell and tell him, "Here's where I'm struggling. I'm still a one-man band, and I don't know how to scale." And he said, "It's time for you to replace yourself in the business. If you want to get to 6 figures a month or high 5 figures a month, you need to replace yourself and build out your team." So first hire was a project manager. Second hire was my first designer, if you will, besides me. Then it was my second designer. Then it was my developer. Then it was my website designer. Then it was my copywriter. They all kind of came together because we need them all, right, to do that kind of work. And now the business starts to scale and it starts to grow. And I always had this vision in my head that I was going to have this agency of some kind. Like I pictured 50th floor VaynerMedia. It'd be like Kaminski Media, and like I'd have 50 people on apples, and I'd be going up and down the halls, barking orders, right? But then I realized how much that costs. And I was like, well, maybe I could do this virtually. And that's what I did. So I found how to build a virtual agency, essentially, but make sure that we run it like a corporate business, like an actual legit business. And that's what we did. So I have designers in 4 different continents, 3 different time zones, but we meet once a week on our team calls. And I have built this family, and the turnover inside of my business is next to zero because the culture that I built inside of my company is so strong, because how I hire is on a value-based system. So I ask very simple questions to get an understanding if their values are going to align with my values. And if they don't, there's nothing wrong with that. They're just not going to be a good fit here. So I find out who has and aligns with my values. I hire them. And that seems to be the golden key into hiring the right people and creating a culture that is really productive and efficient. So let me keep going. So long story short, that starts to build, it starts to grow. But here's what I'm missing. I'm missing the strategic part of it, and I'm missing the processes and systems part of it. So I link up with a fellow strategist, and we start doing work together. He'll do the strategy, I do the design. It's a happy marriage. What I come to find out was we were too much alike. He's a great guy, but we were too much alike, right? Our weaknesses were the same and our strengths were the same. What I would recommend is, if you're going to partner with somebody, find a partner that is opposite of you. Maybe not 100% because it might drive you crazy, but make sure that it's not what I did, because it doesn't go well. So after I got the experience working with him as a strategist for, I guess it was like 6 or 8 months, I was like, I could do this shit. I can. I get the framework. I know I could do this. So now I break off of him and I start doing strategy now. And I start charging for it, right? But my processes and systems are still not right. So now I get a couple bigger projects, right? And they go to hell in a handbasket. And I get this one client who just became a demon. And he was very savvy. Like, you know those automated review bots? Like back in the day, you could hire a company to leave either negative or positive reviews on people's websites, social media, Facebook groups. I had aunts and uncles getting Facebook messaged saying that I was a fraud. So when we realized what was going on, I was like, this is like some real PR shit. Like, this is like a nightmare that became a reality. So I'm not a strong writer, but my wife is a very strong writer. I said, we need to make a statement and we need to make it fast. Otherwise, this could be the end of this business. So she goes on all my platforms and writes this statement. And we come to find out that the guy that did this actually was a felon who embezzled like $1.3 million from old people and like never paid him back.
Oh,
so
charming.
Like, what's that?
Charming.
Yeah. So that comes out in the wash. But here's what happens. Because I've done a lot on social media and put myself out there quite a bit, I start getting responses. But here's what happens. My wife says, go away. Don't go on social media today. Just take the day off and just go away. So my dad lives in like the boonies in Pennsylvania. So I took a ride and I just stayed away from the internet. So I finally come back around 7 o'clock at night and I was like, I have to see what people are writing. Like, I can't let this go. This is my reputation here. So what wound up happening was this. Not only did this person come up and surface, but a couple other clients popped up. I think it was one other client that popped up and they were like, oh yeah, Henry did this to me too. Right? Now I meant no harm to these people, but I did not have my shit together internally. So everything fell through the cracks. And then here I am like, what do I do? Right? So to make it right and to make the bots go away, I immediately refunded both of these people, like on the spot. Problem with that was it was like 25 grand in one shot. And like my bank accounts weren't as hefty as they are now. So that took a big blow to the bank account, right? So once I did that, the bots sort of subsided. But here's what happened. My community came together and like warded off all of this negativity. And they were speaking so highly of me. And like, this is how I found out that the guy was embezzling money, because my community searched this guy and found all of this and posted it on all the platforms that he was bashing me on.
I must have felt good.
Oh, I was in tears. I was in tears because I said, had I not built my personal brand and put it out there, as scary as it was, I would not have a business today. I would not have a business today.
I feel like that would be your worst nightmare, Dustin.
Yeah, but who wouldn't it be worse?
Yeah, no, I know, but I know, like, you know, we've talked about this stuff before, and just it's always in the back of your mind. What if some terrible like act befalls you and it all goes away, kind of thing?
Yeah. So this was right before. So now, mind you, my okay, yeah. So this is right around. My wife is pregnant. And she's going through, you know, emotional roller coasters. I have some serious mindset issues because my son was born through in vitro, right? So I'm not on board with that. Okay. But so we do it one try, it doesn't work. And I'm like, I know it doesn't work because this is forced. Maybe we're not supposed to have children. My wife was adamant. My wife was like, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to let 4 months go by. If I still want to give it another shot, I'm going to give it another shot. And you're either with me or not. So 4 months goes by. I'm thinking, no, we're not going to go through with this because this was, you know, to see her go through that and it not work was awful. Right. So 4 months goes by and she says, I'm going to give this another shot. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. Now it works. So I'm like, holy shit. So now I got 9 months to think about it. Right. And I am not comfortable at all with being a father because I didn't think I could. So son's born. Business is doing okay. No, yeah, son's born. All this shit goes down. Okay. But on top of that, what did I do? I went out and bought 2 Rolexes and a $187,000 car to celebrate. Not to celebrate, to distract me from being a father and distract me from fatherhood. That's why I did that. I come home with this car and my wife goes nuts. Not only does all this shit go down with the clients, but now I spend all this money frivolously. So she says, the car's got to go. Oh no, my father-in-law steps in and says, it's either the car or her. So you make the decision. And like, I could have took a baseball bat to his head. That's how angry I was for him even getting involved, right? But I get it. I get it now because I'm a parent. So I give the car back and I get fucking hosed. You try giving a $187,000 car back after 3 weeks and see what kind of penalties you have to pay. And that's where I go in a hole, like 40 grand. I was in a hole like 40 grand. So I'm thinking, so I sell back my 2 watches and I get half of that money back. Okay. So I'm driving home from the jewelry store and I call my father and I say to him, you know what? I got to tell you something. Giving back those 2 Rolexes didn't sting as bad as I thought it was going to sting. And he says, are you done? And I was like, done with what? He was like, this. He's like, Henry, I raised you on my own and I worked 4 fucking jobs to make sure that you had food on the table every day and clothes on your back. What are you going to do one day when Dante asks you for a pair of sneakers and you can't pay for them because you have no fucking money? I didn't do that to you, so don't do it to him. Now, mind you, I'm 10-2 on the steering wheel, driving on the highway, just hysterical crying. And that day changed my life.
Yeah. So we've talked about this before. You pivoted in quite a big way, right? In life at this point.
Yeah. So I was hell bent on. Now let me just make sure that everybody understands that's watching or listening to this. My son is the best thing that ever happened to me, because I thought I was motivated and passionate and high energy before he came into this world. Now I'm like times 100, because I realized that he's going to come to an age where he's going to be able to Google my name, and whatever he reads, I want him to be proud. And like, that's what I am working for every single day that I wake up. And so my life has changed completely. I have a beautiful wife. I have a beautiful son. I live a beautiful life. I've gotten my finances in the best shape they've ever been in 39 years. But I was hell-bent on figuring out how to manage my money better. And what I found was, through a Jim Rohn audiobook, was the 70-10-10-10 rule. And it was live off of 70% of your earnings and invest the rest of the 30%. So the way I broke it down is 10% goes into marketing, 10% goes into just a rainy day fund with like a decent interest rate percentage, and then the last 10% goes into the stock market. And I found a way. I found a software that's really easy to use. It's called Acorns. And that's how, because I'm not a big stock guy. You're not going to see TVs in my house with the ticker running by. I'm not paying attention to all of that as much as that maybe I should. But that's how I invest my money. And I will be honest to tell you that in 2018, I was able to get that award that's sitting on the wall there. That's called the 2 Comma Club Award. And that is when you have a sales funnel that generated over $1 million in revenue. And so I'm super proud of that. And at the end of generating that kind of revenue, I realized how much I was able to keep of that. And now I'm a very smart investor in my money. And it's funny. I've always heard people say to me, when you get the money, you're not going to spend it like when you didn't have it. And so I look a lot differently now on money and how I spend it and where it goes. And, I have accounts set up for my son, and I have money invested in under his name. And so the bank account is super, super healthy.
So given the crazy roller coaster that you've been through, what do you think the biggest takeaways can be? And I know we're kind of coming up on time, but for everyone listening, what are the takeaways they can apply to their own life?
So one is become financially intelligent. Get a better understanding of your finances and how to spend them. Okay, that's number one. Number two, mindset. Mindset is everything. Okay, and this is where I give a lot of credit to Chris Doe, who has been my one-on-one mentor for the past 2.5 years.
We had him on the show, actually.
Yeah. And I've been working with him closely now, and now I'm inside of his pro group as well as doing the private coaching with him. And he really helped me understand that I did not need any validation outside of my life to justify that I was good enough. Okay. And he said, you have a beautiful wife, you have a beautiful son, you have a father that cares so much about you. There really isn't any need for the flash.
Yeah, I'm definitely, I'm not like the most financially literate person, I'm sure. But I try and do some of what you've talked about, where it is like, you set some aside, you be responsible with it. I got the worst car out of my whole team out in the car park, and I wear it like,
in it.
yeah, Ian's been in it. He can attest. It's pretty awful, right, mate?
Yeah. I was surprised. I was a little bit scared for my life.
Yeah, it's got panels hanging off the side. It's got spider webs on it. It's terrible. Like I couldn't sell it for $200. It's that bad. And I wear it now like a badge of honor because I like being the guy who's building a real company, but drives that. My fiance hates it, but it's my little badge of honor.
We had our first child. Henry, your story is actually a lot similar to mine. When I think can't remember his name. Some big podcaster called it the baby effect. I remember when I found I had 9 months. To me too, it was like the clock starts tick 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 tick. My business, I went from drinking and smoking too much and never getting anything done to within 3 months I had made more money than I ever made in my life, and I attribute a huge amount of that to my child. And I just realized I don't want her to ever smell alcohol in my breath and have memories of daddy when she was a baby or a little girl. I don't want her to smell cigarettes on me. I quit all that. I did all that. But I was so afraid of her ever being in that situation you're talking about that, I mean, until it broke down, we were still driving my 98 black Camry I got when I was 23 with her in the back in the car seat because I didn't want to spend a dime. I mean, I was scared to death.
Yeah. So now, it's just a huge. So now, every time he wakes up and I'm hanging out with him, and now he's about 2.5 now, so he's like starting to become like a little man. And he was a talker before, like all of his friends. So like we always talk to my son, like when he was freaking a month old, my wife and I, because we both don't shut up. So like it's like easy to talk to your kids. And I think that attributed to him talking so early in life. Like now it's funny, like he like has full blown conversations with like my dad, and my father's like, "How old are you again?" Like,
that's what how old do you say he is?
He just turned 2 in August. So yeah, and he's like full blown like, when are we, like, go get the iPad, Dad, I want to watch this. And then when I give him the iPad, he goes right to the app and he downloads the song. Like, it's insane, like what he does at 2 years and a few months. So like I just, every time he comes into my office and like we're hanging out and like my mouse pad is him, I look down and I'm like, that's my other son. But it just reminds me of why I do what I do. And a lot of that is, him. And of course I want to do great for my clients. Of course I want to see them succeed, because when they succeed, I succeed. And it makes me feel good about what I do. But at the end of the day, I want people to remember Henry long after I'm gone as somebody that just wanted to make you better than when he found you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's such a strong reason too. I mean, if I was, say, to, hire you to do something, if you told me I just want to help you, that's not nearly as powerful as you saying, I want to leave a legacy for my children. I want them to Google and be proud of who their dad is. And then I'm like, all right, I completely trust you. Because I mean, that's exactly what you want to hear.
And this is the first time I've heard the whole backstory that in depth, Henry, because I know we've talked a bit before, and I knew all the recent stuff. So now, from everything that I've been aware of, you operate in a very ethical way, and look out for your family, and financially competent and so on. I didn't know the full depth of the backstory. You'd kind of hinted at it before, like I really respect like everything you're doing now, but I didn't know all the Gucci and the nightmares with clients, and under delivering in some capacities. So I kind of like it's pretty different from a lot of stuff that we've maybe had on the show, because I think a lot of it is where we've had, it could be someone who's like lettering in their attic and turns it into something nice. This is like boldly different, so I think really for anyone out there who has felt like they have been on the wrong path and they want to turn things around, or they've got things into a better perspective, and they can look back and see all the lessons they've learned along the way, I hope that kind of provides a bit of a framework and a point of reference for them.
Well, you know what's sorry to go flip right into this, but what else is great about this story is typically you hear the story of rags to riches, but to hear someone say, okay, rags to riches, but then there was just as many problems with money. When you had the money, it was
probably
just
more,
as bad, maybe worse than it was before. It's actually just more complicated, and I think that's something that like we easily believe is just a myth, but it's 100% true.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Most people we've talked to on the show is kind of the opposite, where they've had like really pure intent, but the money has come much later. This is almost like the money came. This is like the Justin Bieber story. It's like the money came very suddenly. Your life blows up a bit in your face, and then the perspective and the age kind of comes later, right?
Yeah. And then that's exactly what happened. Because, I grew up, again, very modest. My father worked as a UPS shop steward. He was a mechanic. He used to do oil changes on the side. We cut lawns. I was cutting lawns when I was 13 years old. So I had a very strong work ethic. And that's one thing that I will always love my father for. That guy busted his ass, and he sort of he planted that seed in me. And you bet your ass Dante's not going to be no slouch, when he gets of an age to be able to work. So that I'm going to carry on. But I had this very wealthy uncle, my mother's brother, who is still a multimillionaire. And when I would go up to visit him on the weekends and stuff, it was culture shock for me. Like you were walking around with like the president of the United States. I mean, you had to see the way this guy was treated in public. It was insane. And the house that he lived in and the cars that he had and just the amount of respect. I mean, they named the children's hospital after him. It's like some real Godfather shit. And I would come home and I would be like, I don't know if you've ever watched The Bronx Tale, but I could really resonate with that story. And I cried when the first time I saw it because I was Calogero. Like, his father was a bus driver, but then he hung around with the mob, the Italian mafia, and he was making $700-800 a night working the crap tables, getting people drinks. And then he comes home to a father who drives a bus. Like my knot was bigger than my dad's, and that's where I really like. It reminded me. That's my favorite story of all. My favorite movie of all time.
A great movie.
That's what I felt. And there was a huge struggle there, right? And then I realized as I got older, Uncle Joe wasn't the hero that I thought he was. Because, married 3 times, a lot of shit goes down. You paint this picture of this guy as like your superhero, and then you really hear what happens, and you're like, oh, shit. What was I doing? Pedestal.
And it sounds like your dad was the hero.
And he really was. Yeah. And there's a show, I got to watch my time, but there's a part in that movie where, Calogero starts getting wise to his dad. Like, you're just a bus driver. And I remember saying that to my dad one day, like, we don't have anything. Right. And my father like gave me one of those smacks like Calogero got. I could cry just talking about it. And I remember my father saying, your father's the tough guy. Like, I'm the tough guy. Right? And I'm in tears now because it just reminds me of that moment, because it felt like it was yesterday. And I was like 10 years old, right? 39. That's how much of an impact that little bit has on me still. So
I give you so much props for man, money is as addictive as any drug, and I give you props for returning those things and seeing those things. That's hard, man. It's like the monkey trap, right? Grabbing the banana. You can't get your hand out because you can't let go of the banana. I mean, it's a hard life lesson, I think. So, I mean, props to you.
Appreciate it, man. It took a lot, but I don't regret one moment of it, because if I did not go through that, I could not be able to share the story with you today. And hopefully the people that listen and watch this take something along with them from this story that reminds them to steer away when that temptation is there, and just help and guide them through the journey of life and through entrepreneurship. And I'm happy that you asked me to come on the show, and I'm grateful to be here.
We appreciate it, man. We said at the start, we're all about wearing your heart on your sleeve and kind of not holding back. And I think it's safe to say you definitely didn't hold back, and you laid it all out there. And I think that's really important, just to share your truth and your truth self. So I also said at the start, we were talking about the Jersey accent and Jordan Belfort. I feel like I just watched Wolf of Wall Street hearing that story. I'm like, Jesus.
I was thinking, I've never heard us all so quietly and raptured in a story.
I think this is the least I talked on any podcast.
I saw Ian leaning in. I'm like, oh, I think I got Ian. He's dialed in.
I do have a quick question before you go, just in super practical. You mentioned a lot about ClickFunnels, and I suppose it's a way of drawing the customer into buying your services. Is it a good tool for designers to be able to?
It built my 7-figure. It built my business to 7 figures. So
why is it better than a website? Say if they say, "Well, I've just built my website. Why do I need this platform?"
Because of the agility of it. So when you build a website, it's like a 747, right? Plane. When you have a funnel, it's like a G4 jet. It's very agile.
It's built for conversion.
It's built for conversion, and you can really
position.
Like my team just built me out another lead magnet this morning, and it's all ready for sale. Like I put the funnel together in 20 minutes because I have templates already where I could just add the product, put the quick little headline, boom, and it's out. Where I think where websites fall short, it's like a little bit more clunkier. Listen, if you're savvy on WordPress and you have all of the tech skill, you don't need ClickFunnels because you could probably do that in WordPress pretty quickly. I don't. So I want to use ClickFunnels to fast track me getting to sale as fast as I can.
Out of the box, ClickFunnels is ready to make sales. Website is more like a billboard almost until you add a bunch of stuff on.
Same thing.
Exactly.
Same thing.
Henry, thank you so much for your time and for jumping on. Where's the best place for the listeners to find you?
You could just go straight to Unique Designs with a Z, not an S at the end, .net. You'll find my Brand Doctor podcast. You'll find my Instagram account at the Brand DR. The best place to find me is on my website. Everything is right there. And again, I can't thank you enough for having me on today and helping me, share my story and mission.
Thank you so much for bringing so much vulnerability and truth as well. We appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. As always, you can find full show notes over at honestdesigners.com or find us over on iTunes and now Spotify by searching for The Honest Designers Show. And remember, we're now on social media too, if you search for Honest Designers. If today's episode helped you, then it would mean the world to us if you took just a moment to leave us a quick review over on iTunes, as this is one of the best ways for other designers to discover the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week right here on The Honest Designers Show.